because I have been a waffling back and forth. And here's my thoughts on why. I believe that most of us, including me, I'm one of them, just like place a coil in an atomizer or coils and add our preferred resistance. For the most part, we get an atomizer, we put our one-trick pony build in, as my man Tom at Catfish likes to call it, or our preferred resistance, and we call it good. And we think that that vape right there should vape the same as any atomizer we've ever had. And if it doesn't, we kind of blame the atomizer. You know, it's the atomizer. We don't look at our builds much. We might add a wrap, take a wrap off. We might raise or lower the coil. We might play with our wick density, which I can tell you for the most part, I run a very thin wick. I run my wick so it's just touches the inside of the coil, and I run it short. I run bottom feeders. But this would apply to drippers too, whether you're dripping from the top or the bottom. To me, it's just the same, just how your liquid gets there, how you want it to get there. And I was thinking today, I was in my car, I thought way back in the day, I was pretty careful about this, but everyone's had it. You had cigarette burns on your seat. Occasionally you'd get a cigarette burn. It would just happen on your seat of your car, and it would piss you off. You'd freak out. I'm thinking all you guys that are dripping out there, how many of y'all have like liquid stains embedded in your seats? I don't get any of that because my liquid is hidden inside that bottle in there. Remember when I need to recharge my atomizer, or where you would drip from the top, I'm just pushing this bottle. Juice is shooting up into these killer 22 millimeter and beyond or less atomizers, and it's recharged, and I'm doing the same thing you're doing. It's just that it's compact and ready to go. So that's kind of where we are. We've always been. I'm the kind of guy that gets set in my ways, and when I get an atomizer, I like, well, let me not get too far ahead of myself, okay? But that's it. So we get an atomizer, we put in what we're used to, and we just think this is it. So my history was like this. We all like to rock within our comfort zone, and I'll describe my comfort zone here. Like I said, I got to read this because it's all over the road. It basically was 3 stages, focusing on atomizers. Let's start with atomizers, okay? So I'll go with my stage 1. And for me, stage 1 was, I vaped for started to vape in October. I went to Rio's. I started to vape in September. October, I went to bottom fed mods after a V2 and a freaking glorified ego with a cardo tank. And once I got Rio's in October, I never looked back to anything but bottom fed or bottom fed. So let's just say from October to February, I vaped cardomizers. And at that time, I thought, man, it doesn't get any better than this. Is all I need is this cardomizer. I'd still be vaping cardomizers probably if, when I went to place an order to get like a bulk supply of like 100 of the ones I wanted, that quantity wasn't in stock at whatever it was, Hoosier e-cigs. Those guys are off my map. I don't really need to buy anything from them anymore. So it kind of freaked me out, and I thought, wow, I need to buy in bulk. I'm not a guy that buys like one. I used to buy my cigarettes in bulk. I buy vaping supplies in bulk for the most part. So I thought, let me try and rebuild. So I reached out to a dude named Dave Log. Dave Log used to be really big up in ECF. Now he's over in Reddit. And a dude named Hildecat. That was new. And I talked to Dave about an A7, okay, and a Hornet. And I wound up going with a Hornet. So for me, stage 1 was getting a Hornet, putting a coil in it. So I want to call it I could rebuild, and it's freaking awesome. Yay, stage. I made a coil and I vaped, and it pretty much kicked the ass of the cardomizer I was vaping. Not only that, just the pride you get in putting your own coil in there and wicking it with, back then we were using CVS sterile rolled cotton for super bitch and wicking. Okay, so that's that stage. I can rebuild. And so you're just glorified, and you're just so happy that every time you squonk and you hit, and you know that now I am off the grid. I'm no longer buying cardos. I'm done with cardomizers. I was already off the grid with juice. I don't rely on anyone for juice. I started vape unflavored Nick Base. That's everything I thought it would be really, really, really good to put in here. I'm a vapor density hound. I'm not a cloud chaser. You're never going to see me in a cloud competition. You're never going to see me, and I could say this never. I've said some nevers before, but I've done them. But I'm never going to have an atomizer that whistles when I like suck on it, and you're never going to see me in a cloud competition. But I do like dense, thick vapor. I think there's people that get much more vapor than me, and that's cool, and I'm working my way up. But I'm a vapor density hound, and I enjoy a thick, warm, not a hot vape, but a warm vape. I vape unflavored Nick Base. That's it. All I vape is unflavored Nick Base. Typically ranges anywhere from 8 to 12, because I don't know if anyone's seen how I make it, but I'm not getting any syringes or freaking beakers out. I'm just pouring shit into shit, and it's pretty much it. So it's VG into my Nick base, and I got some lines drawn, and it's somewhere between 8 and 12. Maybe even 7 and 14, but it's somewhere in that, around that. And it's mostly all VG, and I'm the type of dude that used to smoke Marlboro Lights. Now they call them Golds, I think. They probably called them that when I quit, but I still ordered Marlboro Lights. I quit 3 years ago. In about 2 weeks, it'll be 3 years. Haven't had a cig since. And so saying that I smoke Marlboro Lights, I like the Dirty Nick, the kind that comes from My Freedom Smokes and/or Wizard Labs. Those are the only two I've ever tried. So anyhow, I'm off the grid. Okay, so there you go. I don't know anything about flavor because unflavored Nick base tastes the same in any atomizer I put it in. Okay, and whether I put it in this atomizer, that atomizer, any atomizer, it's going to taste exactly the same. So what I'm going for is vapor. You guys also know, if you've seen any of my videos, that I like stuff real simple. I'm not into like, probably shouldn't say never again, because I never thought I'd do a dual coil, and I spent over a year and a half doing dual coils. Never thought I'd do twisted. I've spent the last few weeks making twisted wire. But I'm not the kind of guy that has the patience to sit down and make a Clapton coil. I sure as hell ain't buying one. I can promise you that. I will not buy a Clapton coil. So I'm not there yet. And anyway, if I was to make one, it wouldn't be a Clapton. It would be so badass. They'd call it like a freaking Gates, a Sinister Gates, or Alex Lifeson for you Canadian Rush fans. They'd call the Lifeson or the Gates coil. It'd be bad. Freaking Clapton. It's old. So I don't like old stuff. Eric Clapton was popular when I was a little kid. Anyway, I think he kind of was relevant maybe then too. But you can listen to whatever you want. So anyhow, so we rock our comfort zone, okay? You've seen what my comfort zone was. So now I can rebuild. And that was the 14 millimeter Addies. And if you remember correctly, back in the day when I started to rebuild, we had on hand, the atomizers were a Chalice, which was very hard to get, a Cyclone, which came along a little later. But so primarily there was a Hornet, an ERA, an A7, and a Chalice, okay? Then came the RM2 and the Cyclone. Then there were some other ones, some weird ones like Growl, whatever they were called. They had weird names. They took a weird coil with resistance, non-resistance wire. Never even delved into that. Too complicated for me. Remember, I like stuff real simple. Okay, so here's what I noticed. Now, thinking back, these atomizers were all fairly restrictive. Okay, they were small atomizers, 14 millimeter. They got tiny little air holes in them. And my theory on why is, again, I've only been around about 3 years. People have been vaping since I was like in high school. But they were restrictive because the world, in my opinion, the vaping world was just starting to emerge from like the cartomizer palooza age. Most people were vaping cartomizers and carto tanks. The dripping world was out there with RDAs, but they were even still pretty primitive. I think there was like IGOs and some things like that. Everything was just starting to evolve. So I got in like right in the beginning when things were, I shouldn't say in the beginning, people were rebuilding long before me. Like there's Genesises, never even tried that, never touched mesh. So things were just starting to evolve. Okay. And so those atomizers, being that they're restricted, there's nothing wrong with any of those Addies. But slowly and obscurely, the dripping world was evolving outside of us. You know, we kind of focused on what was available to us. What do we have? What can we buy? And everything would go out of stock quick. Any decent rebuildable atomizer went out of stock quick, with the exception of the RM2. Rob at Rio was smart enough to get a bunch of them, and they've been on hand. I know I had them for a long time. I'd probably still run them if I didn't have like a brass intolerance. I can't do like brasses. I gotta be stainless steel, but it's a very simple bottom feeder. Probably I wouldn't run them now because my tastes have changed quite a bit. What I want and what I desire has changed. But those were your choices. That was always on hand. Whenever a good atomizer would come out for bottom feeding, it would go out of stock like within a couple of weeks. It was gone. We didn't know what we wanted because we didn't know we wanted it. So back then we thought that 14 millimeter that crushed the cartomizer, or at least did equal to it. If not, it was always better. That's what we thought we wanted. We didn't know we wanted better. Okay, we didn't bother to get outside our comfort zone. We thought that was good enough. But we're all addicts at heart. Anyone that smoked was an addict. And as addicts, now we don't have to go to the store and buy a carton of cigs every week. I don't know, maybe that did something to you, stand in line to buy a carton of cigs. I have no idea. So we're always kind of looking and looking and looking and looking. And so at any given time, I'd have probably 4 of the same, or however many mods I had. I usually had the same atomizer on it. I liked my setups the same, okay? So then those atomizers had limitations. They were small. So the chalice, I liked the chalice quite a bit because at one point I had to switch over to all stainless steel. I couldn't do any more brass. It was really messing with me. Or at least I thought it was. That's part of my deal. I'm OCD. So anyway, because of the limitations between the posts, it forced me to think of making a really small coil to go in there. And also I thought the smaller the coil was, the better it would hold liquid and the top of the wick wouldn't dry out. That was like in April of 2013. I mean, I call it a microcoil. Who would have known that thing was going to become like a worldwide freaking phenomenon, yet so misconstrued by so many people. Let's just forget it. I'm so over the whole microcoil, done with it. Now I just put a coil in and it is what it is. And that is it. But it seemed perfect given the constraints of that addy. A small coil right in the center of the addy. The juice came up out of the center. The coil was right in the center, right beneath where your drip tip goes. It was a tall addy, if you remember correctly. Compared to what we're vaping now, it seemed kind of tall. And it was restrictive. It had a tiny little air hole. I remember I had to drill mine out to 1/16 of an inch. And nowadays, the atomizers I'm running have like 6 holes that are probably 5/32 of an inch in it. So we're going to get to that evolution part, okay? So there was my stage 1. Remember also, drip tips back then were pretty restrictive too. We had tiny little drip tips, 510 drip tips, and you know, I don't even want to go. I don't want to think. They were like a cardo. The tips were, then people have decorative colorful ones, long ones, but drip tips are equally as restrictive. And so now we get to stage 2. That stage lasted for about 1.5 years for me, at 14mm addies. So then one day a guy named TurboCat, he's talking about, TurboCat 6, everyone knows TurboCat on ECF, this Odin atomizer. So I thought, wow, that thing looked really beast, and I liked it. The reason that attracted me to it, because it was the first one of those big, to me that was big. That's a big atomizer, 22, that's still as big as I've ever had. But you could do dual or single coil. Now remember me, I'm never going to do a dual coil. I'm going to just stay single, right? Right. So I get the thing and I put my typical single coil in there. It's probably like a 0.9 ohm. And in my opinion, it just didn't do right. So I thought, wow, let me just wrap up another one and put it in opposite it. And that was over. Now I'm a dual coil guy all the way, running about 0.45 ohms type of thing, right in that range, somewhere in that range. And the vapor, when I first got that 22mm addy, like I said, that was the eye-opening stage. I call it the wow. I never thought my vape could get any better stage. Well, it did. It got big time. Because the atomizers had a bunch more air. There were 2 air slots. So it immediately switched me over to a lung hitter. I went from mouth to lung hitting. It was just the only way you could vape an addy with, at that time, what I thought was a lot of air. Okay? And it was a lot of air compared to the addies I listed previously, like the chalices and the cyclones. I mean, when I got my Odin, I even took a chalice and I drilled a hole right through so it lined up the other one to try and get more air. No matter what I did, I couldn't make it do it because, again, they're such restrictive little addies. It just did not have the same. I mean, I imagine I could have bored slots in it, but I think you'd be trying to like ask things of that atomizer. It just wasn't capable of. We're talking about chalice V1s and V2s. I've never had the version 3, the latest version chalice, so I know nothing about it. And I really don't have any interest in 14mm addies anymore. Many people do. Flavor people seem to like them. That's cool. I'm not a flavor guy, as you know. Tastes good. This all tastes really good. Okay. So I just basically added another coil to my existing setup. So I'm still within my comfort zone. I was just adding another coil. I had to learn that. And while it wasn't that hard, now that I'm not doing it anymore, I'll tell you what, I don't miss it at all. Okay. So we went to direct long hitting and lower resistance. Okay, so then we also increased the drip tip bore. I got with one of my Odins. After I got the first one, I bought more, and Loki shot me this thing called a router bit. I'd never had it before. Then I was sticking like a typical. I think I was using those Delrin wide bore Delrin tips. I don't have them anymore. I've given them to people, but there was something about like it was called a wide bore. I called it a straw. I mean, it wasn't much bigger than that. But then we went to the Loki Lab router, and I thought that was a lot of air going through there. Okay, Loki Lab router. Not only that, I love the way it feels. To me, it's an amazing feeling drip tip. So we got more air coming in, more air going out. That makes more vapor. Okay, especially when the resistance was down. That was the balance I had found at that point because the coils are out to the sides, needed a lot of air, and at that to match the air going in was the air coming out. Okay. So that lasted for about 1 year. I was rocking. I was just rocking. I think I had nothing but Odins. I tried some Nuppins like them for a while, went back to my Odins. I've even got some of the coolest Odins anybody's ever probably seen in their life. Again, only 10 people in the world have that particular Odin. Only 25 people in the world have that particular Odin. Okay, and I'll keep those. Those are some slick atomizers. Then came the Odin V2 and all that stuff. The Odin V2 happened to come out timed for me right when there was a whole bunch of other addies hitting, top air addies. The Odin V2 clashed for me right when my favorite top air addies come out. It was like, wow, this has changed. So it's right about now I want to turn the camera around and let's look at atomizers. Okay, let's look at stuff. I've done enough talking this way. So give me a second to turn this around. We're going to put all this stuff side by side, and I think that's going to help also show you how, when, where, and why, the progression, and how I think with a single coil of the right diameter to your atomizer, and with the right atomizer, you can achieve what a dual coil can. Give me 1 second. Okay, so I'm still in stage 2, and as I was talking about, you get this, the Odin V3 comes out. Very similar to the Odin V2 with the exception that it had 50% more air. Okay? There's the V2. Here's a V1. I called it an Odin V3. Actually an Odin V2 to V1. You see they have a lot more air. Let me show this off again too. You can never resist putting that beast in front of the camera. Okay, so you got more air. We're still running the dual coils. This atomizer has been sitting here for a bit. Love the atomizer. I mean, the quality, everything about the Odin is cool. It's an awesome atomizer, let's face it. Okay, but again, you're building your coils out to the sides, which that was fine. That was my vape. It was game on with the Odin. That was it. But so then along, like I said, stage 3 comes along, and I call stage 3 the experimenting and mixing it up with different 22 millimeter addies. The game-changing phase, okay? And really, it originated because all you freaks started to enable me. Everyone started, oh, you need to try this, you need to try that, try this, that, this. So finally, I gave in to you guys, and I tried different stuff. I think my first one ever was the Freak Show Mini. The first thing I got other than the Odin V3. It was cool at the time, but I just couldn't get into it much. Basically, for me, because I'm a serial squonker, it became like a Leak Show Mini. But what's the similarities you see here? It's still coiled. Dual coils. This one's pretty ratchet, but dual coils pushed out there by the sides. So that's the deal with that, okay? And remember, we're running drip tips, which had a lot wider bore than we were running on our little atomizers, our 14 millimeter atomizers. I mean, this is probably 14 millimeters right here, if I was to guess. Let alone, yeah, this wouldn't work on your typical 14 millimeter atomizer. Okay, so there we are. So I was resistant to go into this stage because, you know, I always had my, it can't get any better than my current setup mentality. It's as good as it gets. And some of the addies, most of the addies, had way more air than I was exposed to, and wider bore drip tips. What I was getting had way more air. What I started to get in phase 3 was way more air and wider bore drip tips. For instance, let's now jump up to the Vector. Top air. This killed for me, even though the build on it's the same. You build a set of dual coils out by the edges. Top air killed bottom air, kind of like radio killed the video show or something like that. Video killed the radio. I don't remember, one of those stupid old songs when I was a punk-ass little bit. So anyway, there we are in the middle of that, okay? So I got it. I got my Vectors rocking. Dual coil, same thing. About 0.4, 0.5 ohms. That was my sweet spot. Can't get no better than this. My biggest revelation came when I was on vacation. Took a vacation this year. Okay, give me 1 second to take a pull here. Move this into the camera, if I may. and some of its counterparts, and I want to discuss this. I'm on vacation, and I've seen sub tanks around here and there. I never really seen them, but I saw some guys vaping them and was talking to some guys that were vaping them when I was on vacation. And I was watching the clouds that these guys are blowing out, and I thought, yeah, they probably have them like, you know, jacked up to like 150 watts. So I went over and talked to them. Again, these guys, it's funny, anytime I've ever approached any other vapors, they've never had any interest in what I'm vaping. But I did ask them about theirs, and they were vaping like in the 35, 40 watt range and putting out quite a bit of vapor. So that right there, and knowing what a sub tank is, it's basically a cardo tank on steroids. The cardo, it's basically like a cardo with a coil and cotton in it with a bunch more air, and the coils are a lot lower ohms. Like it used to be, we called them super low, what were they called? The super short, trying to remember, were they 1.7 ohms or something like that, or I don't remember. Those cardomizers we used, 1 something ohm. Well, now they're down in like they're in deciohms, these things, okay? But it's still just a cardo, like a cardo tank with a coil in it, a bunch of air. So I thought to myself, if a cardo tank can do that, surely there's got to be a rebuildable atomizer that can do that. Because I'm not about to hang my juice off the top of my mod. Just ain't gonna happen. I ain't gonna drip my mod. My juice lives here, whether I'm using a Rio Grande, a T-Mod. I got this thing called a CC Custom coming that I'm looking real forward to. I'm all about mechanical metal bottom feeders. I love the looks of woods. I'm just not a wood guy because I'm an OCD. I have to have stuff clean, and I don't like oils for my hands getting in stuff. I don't like unflavored Nick Base getting in stuff. So I'm a metal mech guy. I don't like regulated mods, although I say I'll never have a regulator. Who knows, one day I might. But my bread and butter is a mod that I know I could drop, I could throw, I could, whatever happens, it's going to work. So anyway, we're going to zoom in a little here. So this perfect atomizer came out right at the time that I got back from vacation. As a matter of fact, I think this atomizer came right after I got back from vacation. And I thought, what a killer platform. Look at it. It's like a chalice in the sense that it's 2-post, and it's got a center coil. Except that coil is 2.5 millimeter ID. The juice feed is right there like a chalice, right out of the bottom, okay? That is the same exact build that's in this one, by the way, okay? Now the difference is that's twisted wire. And you're saying to yourself, well, Russ, what do you mean twisted wire? It's so, why would you go to that level of complication? Well, I find that twisting wire isn't very complicated at all if you got the right tools. Like, for instance, on my drill is that little wire. Oh, I need to remove my last twistings from it. That little wire connector chucked into my drill and a pair of vice grips, and I'm running 4 strands. This is 4 strands of 30 gauge is what you have here. And I call that the Wonder Waffle, the Wunderwaffel. Because it almost looks like just one wall of wire because it's a very loose twist and it all kind of sticks together. I mean, I'm using the Coil Master to make it. There's no squeezing it or anything like that. It's not a perfect coil. It's cold now, so it might take it a minute to fire. It's cold. I just pulled the wick out for you. But this thing fires like, it becomes one wall of wire, of twisted wire. Okay, that's pretty much it right there. That's it. Now I will wick it later and all that stuff because this is one of my vaping mods. I vape it. This is regularly vape. So that, if you look closely at how tightly how that twist is, it's not a twist where you could see bumps. It just looks like almost like ragged barbed wire in there, and it's all contacting fairly well, so you could see. Now the heat up on it is a little bit longer than a regular coil, but I found in this type of coil setup, and this is where I want to address the questions. Why did I go up in diameter? Is because this atomizer can take a larger diameter than your typical 14 millimeter. It's a single, so if I'm running duals, I like a smaller diameter, because remember, I'm trying to keep my resistance down on duals. The bigger I make them, the higher my resistance is going to be. So now that I've got a single in there with this 4-strand twisted, I can go up to 2.5 millimeters and keep my resistance. This coil is 0.69 ohms. The same coil that's on this thing right here, the exact same coil, 0.69 ohms. Okay, so with that, I can put a little bit more wick, and again, I'm not choking this thing with wick. I don't know, this could be a big surprise what we're going to see in here. I'll pull the top off this one. It's almost identical, but this one I've been vaping like a rock star here. So it could, there you go. Alright, so there's that coil. It's another Wonder Waffle. Same freaking thing, it's just a little dirtier. And it does take, like I said, it takes slightly longer to heat up, but once it heats up, it puts out vapor. Now remember, this is not a good way to show vapor because it's just in stagnant air. A good way to show vapor is when you're sucking on this thing, you're pulling air in. Okay, but I'm not going to be able to keep the top off this for long. So then I got this wide open air. Now the air comes in from both sides, so that's the important thing about this coil. Why being in the middle with air on both sides, to me, made it the ideal solution. Because you got this cap, air on both sides, coil in the center. Look how short this cap is compared to, let's take an atomizer we know. Let's take a couple of them. Let's take a couple of atomizers we know. Let's take it next to the Odin, for instance, Odin V2. Okay, let's take it next to the Vector, for instance. Everyone's getting to know it by now. Look at how short the cap is on it. And it's a dome cap. So that's why I think the flavor people really like this atomizer too. I'm trying to see if I can get like a good perspective. It's a tiny little atomizer in a sense of height. But you got all that air. I believe those 3 holes probably equal, I mean, it's way more air. That's probably double the air just on one side. I'm guessing it's probably double the air than both sides of the Odin V2. Okay? And even though the Vector has all these air slots in there, because they're up high, this is, by the way, this is a great atomizer. I love the Vector too. If this didn't come out, I would be very happy rocking my Vectors. But I have fallen in love with this one because I don't make it leak. It does not leak at all. The old Stumpy, because you can see, if you ever have to see when the juice is, and if you can notice the distance between here and the air holes is a lot more than, say, like the Derringer was. There's a nice amount of space up on the deck. Your coil is pretty high. So that means you got all this air whooshing in from both sides. Okay, it's coming from here and here. It's hitting, I put it to where it's hitting the coil about here and here. I don't put it on the ends. And even the fact that that's post is there, when I put on my cap, again, it's not right on the side like this, but it's about like this. So my coil air is just like, how is it? It's coming like this. And it's coming right up this tiny little cap, and it's coming right up through this tiny but wide little chuff. Heck, you could almost fit a standard 510 down in it. 510 drip tip. I mean, and now it's Teflon, so it's nice and cool. So you got this short little configuration, lots of air. Okay, got to go a little bigger to keep the resistance where I want. I didn't want it to be too small and be too low resistance with that twisted wire. To me, twisted wire is key for this single coil to perform the way that I like it to perform, with the amount of vapor that I like. Key. Okay, that's key. It doesn't spit. Now, if you've got a bunch of gaps in your coil, if it's real gappy, it'll spit. This one, and again, because it's so close to your mouth, spitting is probably a little more of a concern with this setting. I know a lot of people have complained about spitting, and I'm going to say that I believe that you're getting spitting because your coil probably has a lot of gaps in it, particularly if it has like a bad end gap. I've noticed if it has like an end hanging off, it'll spit. If I used a tightly twisted wire, it would be more prone to spitting. Okay, that's one of the things I noticed about loose twisted wire. And I say loose twisted, it's so loose that it's pretty much loose enough that when it's coming out of the post, sometimes you could, if you look real closely, you'll see that it's, my camera does not do well in this type of setting, but it starts to fray almost coming through the post. It's that loose. So it almost behaves to me like, I'm just guessing, like a parallel 4-strand coil would behave. It's just a whole bunch of wire that's really close together. So would this work well with Ready Wick? I don't know. I'm not into nuclear wicks. I like my cotton. I like to change my cotton. I'll change it every few days to a week. I can twist up a couple of feet of wire. And lately I've been in an experimenting stage. I've been experimenting with different types of twists to produce less spitting, a warmer or cooler vape, more vapor, easier to build on. Some twists don't like to roll well on the coil master or any. I don't hand wind. My fingers just get too tore up anymore. I don't hand wind. But I found to twist well on the coil master is you want a nice long piece of wire. Like, in other words, usually I cut about a 5-inch strip to roll this type of coil up. And I'm going to tell you that's 7 winds on there. You can't count them because, again, the wire is all together. But I started out with 9, took 2 off, and left 7. Okay. And the twist, it comes out, the twisted wire comes out perfect on the 2.5 millimeter rod. Is it quote unquote a microcoil? No, but like I said, who even knows? No one even knows what a microcoil is anymore. Most people don't know what it ever was to begin with. No one knows that it was wrapped. Not very few people remembered that it was just wrapped on a little picture nail and was a microcoil diameter. And I can care less. Now it's just a coil. It vapes like hell. The twisting wire takes no time whatsoever. The beauty is, with the right atomizer and that single Z coil, is anytime you want to change it, it is the most easy thing in the world to change a single coil. There's no balancing, there's no counting wraps. Heck, if I have one too many wraps, it's not the end of the world on one or the other. I don't have to take pictures of it anymore. So the time I used to spend balancing my dual coil builds, now I would spend less time twisting wire. So I've experimented with different twists and find this loose twisted 30 gauge 4 strands is just the perfect spit free. No afterburn, no before burn, no wick burn. That to me is perfect. So I don't know how well that's answered any of these questions, but I just wanted to give you kind of where I am, how it's evolved to here, and why to me the single coil, if you can get an atomizer that supports a single coil. Now, hanging one off the side post, there is one called the Haster. It's pretty good. It's pretty awesome. I like the Haster. It's a dual or single. The important thing is, if you're going for a coil, for an atomizer with dual or single coil capabilities, you want to make sure it has AFC that supports that. You could put a single coil on any atomizer you want, but if it has dual AFC only, you're kind of screwed on that deal. The Haster has single or dual. The Vector, you only got single coil. You can only do single coils on it. I mean, what a dumbass. You can only do dual coils on a Vector. There's no way to shut down the AFC on just one. You could probably try hanging a single coil off the side, but again, key to me is that that coil's in the center. If it's hanging off the side of the post, now a lot of people have been building their stumpies with traditional dual coils right out by the air, but my preference takes that center coil, pops the air on it, hitting it like this, and right up, and it's just perfect. So, could you take that and make it 3 millimeters in here? I can tell you that you probably could, but look at it, it's tight. You could probably make it 3 millimeters. I don't know, I don't know much about ReadyWick sizes, but I would say that if you can get your hands on an atomizer that takes a center coil like this and stuff your ReadyWick in it, it's probably going to outdo your dual coil setup if you use some loosely twisted wire. And give yourself a little bit of time to adapt. Don't just put in a build and go this. When I put in my first build, I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. But I tried different builds and had different results with a little spitting here or there. Sometimes I'd build it where it was just too cool, or I'd build one that was too low and too hot. But I experimented a little bit and found that 7 wrap loosely twisted 30 was perfect for me right at 0.7. Now think about it, 0.7 ohms. That's a pretty high resistance for a lot of us guys that are used to dual coils. That's a high resistance. But if you notice the amount of vapor I'm getting from it, and the fact that, again, the coil, if you can look down in there, pardon me if my drip tip is a little nasty, the coil is right there. I mean, if you could see that in perspective, it's right beneath your, I bet it's a ½ inch from your lips. I like the air to float. I like it to come up and go over the top of my coil. I don't like my air to come up under it. So my coil is relatively low. I have it pressed down on as low as the rod will go with the coil master on here. I don't like as much air to hit under my coil as much as I like it to like swoosh up over it, just wash up over the top of it. If that's a good way to put it. So there you go. I would suggest trying, and particularly if you can. I'm not going to go out and say just stick a single coil on it. Any Addy that takes a dual or single, but particularly with this atomizer, this type of atomizer. Hopefully, this is where things are going in the future. Is that guys that are making these RDAs, and there's other ones out there too, are come to realize that this center coil is such a producer as opposed to, and this is my opinion. Remember, I'm an unflavored Nick Bass guy. It produces so well, and it's so much less work than trying to hang a balanced pair of duals off the sides and keep them out there at the height the same, counting winds and resistance and all that stuff. This is it for me. It's been a huge game changer. I only hope you can find the same love in something, because like I said, once I get a setup running, I'll run it. I don't see anything changing me running this. I don't know what's going to come along and knock this off, unless it's another. I mean, if now I would say what I would think could knock this off. The same type of atomizer with air holes in the top. Okay, not on the side, because I mean, every now and then I'm a squonk freak. You know it. I mean, you got to squonk the hell out of this thing. I mean, let me just give you an idea of how much juice it holds. I mean, let's just take a look at it together. I mean, I'm just pressing. It takes a while to fill. It probably holds. It holds probably, just wild guessing, a couple of milliliters in there, but it does drain out. But it drains away nice and slow. There's always going to be a little juice in your wick, so you're not really dumping out juice that's collected in there, but your wick can hold quite a bit of juice. So every now and then I'll notice if I have it turned too much to the side, I might get a little juice out of the holes. Or if I knock it over by accident, sometimes a little juice will come, but it's very rare. Very extremely rare. Especially with my holsters now that I got from CB cases. This thing's not getting all sideways in my pocket. So this atomizer, this is all I run right now, are these freaking Stumpies, because of their awesome vapor, ease of build, and that's it. That's all I got to say on where I'm at with my vape and why I'm back to single coil. Because I'm a simple, Leonard Skinner, when he wrote that song, I'm a simple kind of man. I am, and I experiment a lot behind the scenes, but I experiment to get stuff where it's as simple as possible for me. And the simpler I can make it, the easier it is. Now, I'll show you guys again. Anyone that hasn't seen this freaking case, this Coil Master case, you saw my drill. You see my wire here. This is my wire, okay? There's my drill. I see people have all these elaborate freaking tools and stuff for rebuilding. And you saw my drill, my vice grips, and my wire. Aside from that, to rebuild this setup of an atomizer, you need the following tools. No more. 0 more tools. Everything you see right here. And this is to hold strands of twisted wire, by the way. Little ingenuity. This is tight twisted wire. It says 4 x 30T. I just keep them, that's about a 5-inch piece. That you can twist around the Coil Master with no problem, but when it gets loose twisted, it doesn't like to twist as much. It likes to deflect, so you want to twist with a longer piece. Scissors for cutting my Kojendo wicks. Pliers, or wire cutters, pliers, an ohms meter, the Coil Master with the one rod I run, the driver that works on my addies, and it also happens to work on this Coil Master, and my wicking kit. And you wonder why this is in a case. Why you got that in a case? You travel out? Hell no. I would never bring rebuilding supplies with me anywhere. I'd bring like 4 mods. Tweezers, Kojendo, and this. Why is it in this case? Because now when I want to rebuild, I'm not reaching for anything. I just open this up on my desk. Everything is here. I don't even have to take this thing out of the freaking thing. If I want to check resistance, I'm pretty lazy about checking resistance. I barely check it anymore. It's right there. Everything's there. And then when I'm done, I just dip it up and put it away. I'm not like putting this in this place, cutting tools in one place, squeezing tools in another, ohms meter over here, wife moves it somewhere, driver in another place, this thing rolling all over my desk. Hell no. So this K-bag, I'm propping it because it's freaking, you don't need much to rebuild that simple coil, or really any setup. Don't need 2 Coil Masters, 2 poles, just one, because I'm not balancing coils. Don't need to squeeze any coils because they're coming off there right. So that's what it's done for me. It simplified my vaping supplies into this little friggin' 12 by 8 inch by about 1.5 inch case. That's what I need to rebuild atomizers. This would never come with me on the road because I would never rebuild on the road. I'm bringing locked and loaded stuff, and if you're going away for a week and 4 mods ain't gonna get you, you got the wrong mods. 4 addies ain't gonna get you. I don't know, maybe your juice is so like gunky that you have to change your wick. I got that. I'd bring some wick, but mine isn't. My juice, those wicks could stay for a week easily, especially in 4 mods. All this is cool. These are things of the past. There's a whole bunch of Stumpy supplies over here. I shouldn't really say things. These are, some of them are like heirlooms and just spare supplies and drip tips, but those are all the atomizers I have anymore. But I do have another Rio coming back because one of my buddies couldn't get used to it, and another Vector coming back. Gave it to him to give him a shot. So don't know if I answered the questions, but that's where I'm at and why I'm here. And I always will tinker behind the scenes to try and improve my vape, but not to the point of making anything like a Clapton or anything. think Twisted's about as far as I'm going. So there's my epilogue, my diatribe, my freaking vlog on my life. So Super X saying see ya.